Playing the waiver wire is important in fantasy leagues and can make or break seasons. For this waiver wire entry, we will take a look at Dallas Cowboys wide receiver Noah Brown's fantasy profile and determine whether or not he's a player that you should be monitoring or picking up on the waiver wire. We'll start with some of the things I like about Noah Brown's fantasy profile. His productive start to the season. Noah Brown has been productive in both of the first 2 weeks of the season, playing 88% of the offensive snaps and putting up 5 receptions on 9 targets for 68 receiving yards in Week 1 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and playing 85% of the offensive snaps and putting up 5 receptions on 5 targets for 91 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown in Week 2 against the Cincinnati Bengals. Being productive at the start of the year makes it easier to see how Noah Brown may be fantasy relevant this year. The other thing I really like about Noah Brown's fantasy profile is that he's got wide receiver friendly coaches. Dallas Cowboys head coach Mike McCarthy and offensive coordinator Kellen Moore have been 2 of the best in the league at getting production out of their wide receiver rooms over the course of their NFL careers in an offensive coordinator or a head coaching role. Having wide receiver friendly coaches will make it easier for Noah Brown to see a healthy workload each week. Moving on to some of the things that concern me about Noah Brown's fantasy profile. He's been around a few years and has never done anything. Noah Brown has been around for 4 seasons prior to the start of the 2022 season and hasn't really done anything. The former 7th round pick had never caught a touchdown prior to the Week 2 game in the 2022 season, and his best season was in 2021, where he had just 16 receptions on 25 targets for 184 receiving yards. There's a strong chance that he's just a flash in the pan, and these first 2 weeks were a bit more of a fluke. The other major thing that concerns me about Noah Brown's fantasy profile is Michael Gallup's return. Michael Gallup is supposedly close to returning to action. Gallup has been a solid wide receiver over the course of his career, with career averages of 3.51 receptions on 6.33 targets for 52.8 receiving yards and 0.27 receiving touchdowns per game. Gallup's return will impact the snap share and target share that Brown sees each week. Some additional thoughts and information on Noah Brown's fantasy profile. Dak Prescott's return. The Dallas Cowboys have been saying that Dak Prescott could return sooner than expected from his thumb injury. Dak Prescott has been a very solid passing quarterback over the course of his career, throwing for 4,449 passing yards and 37 passing touchdowns in 2021. Will Jalen Tolbert get more involved as the season goes on? If this happens, Noah Brown would likely be the guy moving down on the depth chart. Personal opinion. Noah Brown is not really a guy that interests me in most leagues. In 12-team or more leagues, you could maybe use a roster spot on him if you're desperate for a wide receiver that can contribute as a flex play in the immediate future. But overall, he's more of an immediate low-end streaming flex than a guy you should have in your long-term fantasy plans for 2022. In deeper leagues, if you play in an auction budget league, he's a guy that you should only use a $0 bid or a $1 bid, and if you play in a waiver wire priority league, you should only use a low-end waiver, a bottom 3 spot in your league if you want him. Overall, I'm not really targeting him on waivers, but this is what you do if you were interested in picking him up. And that's it for today's waiver entry. If you have a player that you'd like to see covered, drop a comment below.